some time to join us. Hey, girl. Hi, Jeanette from Phoenix, Arizona. Welcome. Hi, Michael from East Los Angeles. Hi, Anna from Wichita, Kansas. Hi, Tamara from Pennsylvania. Nice to see you again. Norma from Texas. Fania, I always hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, from Wisconsin. Hi, Vivian from DC. Melissa from New Hampshire. Isaac from San Jose. Sylvia from Fresno. Wendy from New Hampshire. Hey, a lot of New Hampshire with us. Tanika from Washington State, Bremerton, which I'm thinking is outside of Seattle, if I remember correctly. Hi, Patricia, or Tricia from New Hampshire. Yes. Hi, Shafan from Atlanta. So glad you all could join us today. I am in Richmond, Virginia. So I'm joining you from Richmond, Virginia. My colleague Dee is in Chicago, and our very special guest, she's in the New Hampshire, Greater Tilton area. Any other check-ins while we wait for some more people to come and join us? So we're going to go ahead and get started as people continue to join. Today, we're super excited. I'm your host, Alexandra James, standing in for our CEO, Kathy Wolf. I'm the Chief Program Officer for Be Strong Families. And today we're going to be having a great presentation called Cooperative Co-Parenting in the Age of COVID. I'm super excited that we have Yolanda DaRocha. I probably messed it up. Okay, great.
No, you can.
She is with the Greater Tilton Area Family Resource Center, where she is a certified recovery social worker as well as a parent leader. As when I turn the presentation over to her, she'll give you a little bit more background about her. Hi, Monica from Chicago. Next slide, please, Dee. So ways to engage, for those of you who are always with us, you already know, but for those who are new, if you are talking, put your phone on mute, please. When you aren't talking, when you're ready to comment, you can raise your hand and we will unmute you, but then you will need to unmute yourself. Please be patient with us as we try to get through the chat. Sometimes they come extremely fast. And then feel free to type your comments in the group chat and make sure it's going to all panelists and attendees. So we have some agreements we like to operate from to make sure this is a safe space and we all get to have a wonderful time during the hour that we're together. So we want to speak from our own experience. We're going to use I statements. We're going to definitely operate by the golden rule, which is we want to treat people the way that we want to be treated. And we'd like you to bring your full presence, please no multitasking. And those who are always joining us have already started to type I agree in the chat. So those of you who are new, just if you could agree to these agreements, we would definitely appreciate it. That is all on my screen. We don't have videos. And so with that being said, and everybody's telling us I agree. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Kim. Next slide, please, Dee. And I'm going to turn it over to Yolanda.
Hi, how are you guys? I'm so glad that everyone could make it today. We're just going to kind of get into a little bit of a cooperative co-parenting in the age of COVID, because I know that there's a lot of different things that are going on with the pandemic and, you know, not being with your partner and co-parenting your children. So we'll touch on a couple of things about that today. Next slide. So a little bit about me is I'm 43 years old. I have 3 boys and I have 1 girl, 16, 21, 10, and 8. I have 1 on the way. So I just found out, yeah. I was born in Far Rockaway, Queens, New York. Came here when I was a child. We left all of family that would live between here in Pennsylvania and Puerto Rico. I've been in long-term recovery. I've been 20 years in and out of recovery with some struggles and reoccurrences. But I work at the Greater Tilton Area Family Resource Center, like Alexandra had said. I started volunteering as a parent volunteer leader, and then I started as an AmeriCorps member. I joined AmeriCorps, and I have not only taken the Parenting Journey in Recovery class, which is a class that we offer here at Greater Tilton Area Family Resource Center for parents who are in recovery and trying to, thank you, trying to work through that, trying to work through their recovery and being a parent to their children, and, learning some basic tools that they might not have had or have forgotten. I'm a parent leader in recovery. I passed my certified recovery support worker, and I'm waiting now to receive my certification through the state. So that's a little bit about me. Next slide, sorry. So a little bit about my co-parenting, which it wasn't that easy, the first time around in the beginning. I've been co-parenting since my son, who is 21 years old, was 5. So when I first started co-parenting him with his father, there was a lot of anger and resentment there between the two of us. So the experience that I had with him was so much different than my other 2 children that I have that are 10 and 8, and they live in Boston, Massachusetts with their father. And you live and learn as you go along, but unfortunately, my son had to go through a lot of growing pains with me, as I was learning along the way, that being hostile is not a way to get your point across. And, there's a lot of things that you do as a co-parent that I didn't realize that affects the children. So the outcome has definitely been different between, between my children and my firstborn, who's now 21. We had an estranged relationship, but now we have a great relationship. So couldn't ask for better. So next slide. So you have to ask yourself, do you want better or do you want bitter, right? So what does conflict look like? I mean, for me, it was always body language. It was always my tone of voice, my facial expressions, the eye rolling. And then I wanted to do the ignoring because I thought that if I ignored him, that it would be a big deal. Ooh, I'm ignoring him, so he's upset. Yeah, not really. Sarcastic, jokes. There's a lot of anger there as well, right, between the two of us, because we had just literally split and it was new. Like when we first got together, we were young. So when we split, there was a lot of anger there. Violence, of course, verbal attacks and physical violence. And some of these that you look at can happen to the children as well. They can affect the children in a lot of ways. So it's not just the adults that are co-parenting, but it's your children as well. So just some of the things to look at. Next slide. So hopefully, you can try to choose better so that you don't have to have your kiddos in the middle of a parental warfare. Because it is really difficult. Sometimes I feel as if one parent or the other wants to be superior, and you have to just learn as parents co-parenting your children that you can both take the leadership role. That both parents are responsible for the children's mental and physical health. So I think that sometimes we forget that because, like I said, we go on a control. We're trying to control the situation, right? And so so you have to ask yourself if you want to influence the children in a positive or in a negative way, right? You know, you got to try to tolerate each other. It gets frustrating. Um, you have to have the ability to resolve conflict, self-discipline. Um, these behaviors tend to be lacking in conflicted co-parenting relationships. Um, so I mean, like I said, like if one parent or the other wants to be, you know, kind of wants to take the role and take the lead, it affects a lot of different um, avenues of co-parenting. So like not only does it not affect, so not only does it affect the children in a negative way, but your relationship gets tarnished and you don't build that quality relationship between you and the parent, right? So just some things you got to think about, you know, you don't want your kids to be in the middle of your stuff, right? So because there can be a lot of negative feelings towards you know, the other parent when you're going through a divorce or a separation, right? But you need to remember that you came together for your children, right? So next slide. So this is definitely some of the experiences that I've had with my children. Um, Definitely co-parenting and putting the child in the middle makes the child worry, stressed, anxious, frustrated, angry. I know for me, like my son was so angry, like so angry, and it led to physical. You know, he started getting physical with me and name calling. Um, and he was just didn't really know how to express himself, you know, so he would lash out in anger, or he would name call, or he would hit, you know. So and that was just putting him in the that was just because we were putting him in the middle, right? So my oldest son, who's 21 years old, he still has anxiety, he's still anxious, he's 21 years old and he still goes through those incidents, because my separation with his father was horrible, you know, it was horrible. And you can only do what you can do, like what you don't know. So if you do better, you know better, right? So just some things to be cautious of and aware of with your children when you are putting your children in the middle. You know, though it does affect them in a lot of different ways. So next slide. So during the time of COVID, some of the topics that were brought up, right, between me and my kids' fathers was school, right? So do we want our kids to go to school? Like, do we want our kids to do live school, or do we want them to do online, right? And so one might want the child to do online, the other one might want the child to do live, right? So you think about school and you think about sports, right? So my daughter's involved in field hockey, and her dad kind of doesn't want her to do school, nor does he want her to do sports. But her outlook on it, she's 16 years old, is a little different, and I'm her mother, so I'm going to support her decision. um you know, and I told him, yeah, her whole life you taught her about germs and washing her hands. Now you have to know that she's going to do those things, right, when she's not around. Work too, you know, she had a job, she was working at a daycare, and her father told her to quit, so that's why she left the job. I didn't know about that. I was just like, why is she all of a sudden just not doing anything, you know? And what happened with her job? And then she told me, you know, dad told me he wanted me to quit because of COVID. And so that was a little frustrating, because that's not something that I knew nor was I aware of. Um, Her social connections as well, you know, he didn't want her hanging out with her friends. And I was like, you know, that's a big part of her identity, really. And she's going to be a junior in high school. She has to be connected with her friends. Like, you have to, um, not that you have to, but I always said to him, it would be nice for you to know that our daughter is taking precaution the way that she needs to take precaution, washing her hands, wearing a mask, keeping her distance. And family, the same thing. So when you co-parent, she lives with her dad some of the time, and she lives with me most of the time, right? So dad has his family and I have my family. So then you think to yourself, well, who are they around? You know, and do I want my child around them? And do I want my child around that? So it can get it can get really complicated for sure. Um, yeah, so next slide. So as I was saying before, oh, oops. Is this the next slide that's supposed to be on? Yeah, this one, that one. Okay. So like I was saying before about parenting journey and recovery, this is kind of the parenting journey and recovery flyer that we have. It's part of it for the parenting journey and recovery that we do here at Greater Town Area Family Resource Center. And it's really about, you know, getting a lot of families to reconnect, right? Whether it's estranged families, whether it's, you know, families that are co-parenting with other families, right? So like for me, it's trying to live in recovery as well as, you know, being engaged to a man that has children of his own, right? So it's combining the families and learning tools and learning what to do. So we definitely have that going for us here. And we just actually finished up PJ2, so we can offer that as well. That's exciting. But yeah, this is kind of just a picture showing, you know, how different families, you know, every type of family is different. Cute little baby right there. Next slide. Yeah, so we talked about that. We talked about some of the things that would be brought up between you and your co-parent, which is school, sports, work, social connections, and family. So next slide. Yeah, yeah, we saw this as well. This is yeah. So when you co-parent, there are some things that I feel like you need to consider while the pandemic is going on, right? Try to always problem solve, right? I know that it's not going to always be easy, but try. Talk calm in a matter and make decisions together, right? In a calm matter, you just talk and make decisions together. Um, Understanding each other in the stressful conditions, right? So like you can't assume the other parent does things the way that you want them done. You can't assume that there's not stuff going on with the other parent that's stressful, you know, and especially with these conditions during COVID. And there's probably going to be arguments along the way. And you need to stand back and unselfishly ask yourself, how can we work together for the children? So that's like your main focus. You always keep going back to the children. It's not about me, it's not about him, it's not about us, it's about the children, right? Because whether we want to believe it or not, children are affected um by harsh, you know, tones and the way that the parents speak to each other and their body language and the things that they say about one or the other parent. They're definitely affected by that. So we got to try to make sure to keep the children first and safe. Okay, next slide. When you're co-parenting, some of the questions that you want to ask yourself, right, is that sometimes, well, first and foremost, what's in the best interest of the child, right? Like going back to that again, like what's in the best interest of the child and the child alone. And then you have to ask yourself, does one or the other parent have the ability to stay home with the child, you know, and maybe do some remote learning with them? That's just something that you guys can talk about as maybe a possible backup plan, right? So does one or the other partner parent have one or more contact with the public, right? So like I was saying about like the separate families, right? So you have to ask yourself when you're talking to the co-parent, like how much public access do you have with different people, right? Because if you have a lot of access to the public, you're probably going to want to have maybe some precaution around that, and it could even affect the visitation plan, right? So like if you're supposed to have a certain visitation plan and dad's is just a high risk environment because he's around the public a lot, then the visitations might look a little different, right? Or same thing with mom, right? So you have to ask yourself, is anyone in the household over the age of 60 and suffering any medical conditions? There's a lot of things to consider, right? Especially in the age of COVID with this pandemic. One of the other two, does one or the other have better access to the safe? So I'm thinking all different kinds of ages, right? So for me, like I have a 21-year-old, a 16-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 8-year-old. So does one or the other parent have better access to the outdoor spaces while keeping the children busy and of course with the recommended physical distancing, right? Respecting that as well. So these are just some things you kind of got to go over with the other parent. And it's not necessarily things that you had to consider before. But now that we are in the age of COVID, though, these are some of the things that we do need to consider. On top of life and everything that's frustrating with that, we have this now, right? Just trying to be patient. Next slide. So when I look at this, I think of exactly what I just said, like the different ages of the children, or maybe not. Okay, so this is another one that I found was important to put up there, and it's about to put up on the presentation, and it's about co-parenting, and how does it affect the other one crossing state lines. So like for my 10-year-old and my 8-year-old, that's the issues that his father and I had, right? So they're in Newton, Massachusetts, and I'm here in Tilton, New Hampshire. So the other parent may be feeling, you have to take in consideration what the other parent may be feeling when you go and pick up the child, right? So it's like, it's not a big deal, what's the problem? But the other parent, it may be a big deal, right? You have to take the other parent's feelings into consideration. Whether the other parent is quote unquote capable of, taking all of the precautions that are necessary when one or the other parent is not with the child. So you can't just assume, right? Like we're both loving parents to our children. So we both want to do what's best for our children, right? So like if we have to take precaution, that's what we're going to do. This is how I look at it. When one or the other parent keep you from the children. So that's in fear that they don't have the control. So that's kind of what I went through with the withholding of my children because of the social gatherings, right? So like dad didn't want, well, she's not taking the kids because of COVID, period. Well, it doesn't really work that way. Let's come up with a compromise, right? Well, I don't want the kids around, this and this. Well, I'm aware of that, right? So like, I know the precautions that need to be taken. Let's talk about it and let's discuss it amongst ourselves in a rational way, right? Because just making a decision, one parent just making a decision and leaving the other parent out affects the child as well. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, why isn't mom coming and getting me? Well, if the other parent doesn't explain to the children that, there's a pandemic going on and mom can't get you right now for a little while or a couple of weeks, 2 weeks or whatever, this is why, instead of your child just thinking that you forgot about them or you're not coming to pick them up anymore, right? So there's that fear of the child's safety, which when you're co-parenting, you have to make the other parent realize and understand that we all are concerned about the children's safety, right? And their welfare. Next slide. So when I'm thinking of family, I'm thinking of a family tree, right? Oh. So we're going to do, okay. When I'm thinking of a family, I'm thinking of, I'm thinking of a family tree, right? Like, so there is so much that there is to family, right? There's grandparents, there's aunts, there's uncles, there's there's parents and step-parents and stepchildren. And that to me, when I look at this photo, is that I think of that. I think of a family tree of everyone that is linked to your family, right? So it's not just you and it's not just dad, right? So then you have to think to yourself, what do I need to do if I have to use these accesses, right? So if I have to like get grandma to watch my child, right? Use those resources that is of the family tree, and realize that family spreads out, families everywhere, right? So just having that conversation with other family members and the parent, the co-parent as well, the dad or the mom. Next slide, please. Thank you. So some tips to consider when you're co-parenting, right? So again, going back to the children's happiness and well-being is your number one goal, right? So as parents, we're kind of like, we can be selfish, right? But if you always have in your mind that your child's happiness and well-being is your number one goal, you'll do all right. Sure. Treat your partner like he or she is in a like business fashion, business manner, right? So if you're struggling with it, you could always treat them, the dad or the mom, like it's somebody that you work with in your office, right? So treat your child as a child. Don't put too many adult responsibilities on your child, and don't allow your child to hear things that you may say negatively towards the other parent. Encourage your child with the other parent, the relationship with the other parent. Encourage that, definitely. I was always trying to compete, me against the other parent, and that's really not what it's about at all. You have to encourage a relationship with the other parent, because if there's anything that needs to be said about that, the kids will find out along the way on their own. You don't need to, whatever that looks like. Visitation exchanges, make them pleasant, make it happy, I know that when I drop my kids off, they're sad and they're upset because they don't want to leave mom, right? So then I try to make them look at some of the positive things that would be if they stayed with dad, or mom will be back and I'm going to see you, and this is when I'm coming to pick you up. Always reassuring, right? Taking a parenting class, that's huge. I did that. I did a parenting class for teens. I did parenting journey and recovery. I did PJ2. Like, I definitely take a lot of classes and a lot of training. Like, that helps me out a lot. Sometimes when you don't know what you don't know, it helps to take these parenting classes, right? It can be beneficial to help you along the way. Absolutely. Be patient and be flexible, right? So that's easier said than done, but especially when you don't live in the same state. Like, it's like, um and for me, it's really frustrating at times because I don't even get, warning that, I'm gonna have to bring my kids back, or they're gonna stay with me for an extra couple of days. And that's a little frustrating. So you have to learn to be patient, flexible with that. Having someone to talk to, whether it's the adult, whether it's the child, such as a school teacher, a counselor, a faith leader, a friend, right? We all have those people that we need to like reach out to and talk to during difficult times. And separation and divorce is not easy for children or parents, and co-parenting isn't either. Next slide. So when I look at this picture, of course, I see the family in the center, and I see peace around them. Oh. And I see
I
peace.
apologize, everyone. My slides tend to want to move on its own.
Oh,
One moment. It's very odd. It's never happened before. I really, really apologize. But I'll try my best to see, make sure it doesn't happen too often.
okay. It's
Sorry,
okay. It happens. It's all right. It's not your problem, Dee. Thank you.
sorry. I'll try my best.
Thank you for letting us know. Yeah, and so, you know, everybody's, so with this picture, like I said, it just made me think of families in the center, right? Pieces around you, and every family member is different, like with religion and beliefs and that sort of thing. So that's kind of why I put this photo up to share. Next slide. Okay, well, some of the things that we find in strong families and some of the things that they have going for them, and it's not necessarily that other families don't, it's just that some families that are strong, they tend to make their relationship a high priority, right? So I know for me, like with my children, they don't like to do anything besides sit in front of the TV and play video games. But for me, my relationship with my children and my family is a high priority. So I make them do the things that they don't want to do. And then once we go out, when we do them as a family, they love it. They're happy that they did it. And we're engaged and we're having memories, right? Um, and you face difficulties and bad times, but it doesn't destroy them, right? So you go back to the 5 protective factors with that, right? So we've learned about those with the parental resilience and social communications and or connections and concrete support, knowledge, parenting and child development, social and emotional competence of children, right? So we can always go back to the 5 protective factors. Showing respect and affection and recognizing the importance of the uniqueness of families. So that's like going back to the slide previous, right? So all families are different, you know, there's not one family that is the same. They have their own unique ways and they have their own beliefs, and you embrace and respect that, right? And you can share your beliefs and you can share your feelings and you can listen to one another and feel more connected, right? Because communication is one of the key elements for family relationships, right? So like what we do is we call family meetings, and that's when my kids know, right? Oh, here we go, right? But if you're not communicating with them and you don't let them listen to you and you don't listen to them, you don't really get anywhere, right? So we find that was a good tool to use. Pull together and draw from strength, right? And when problems arise, right? So there was a situation that occurred with my 16-year-old, and I was blown away and taken back by it. And the problem arose, and as a family, we handled it, right? I actually had to speak to her father regarding it. You know, and we're not together, so we had to co-parent through that, right? So let's discuss this, let's problem solve this, let's talk about this, right? Spending time together helps create family feelings of family, right? So like I said, with going out and doing things with my children, right? So it's like you won't remember the video game, but you'll remember the memories that we have with each other, right? So there's that. Yeah. Yeah, so you have to, so like I said, you know, you have to draw the strength from each other. It's like with my daughter's father, it was like the last thing he wanted to do was talk to me about the issue that had occurred with my daughter. Yeah, just tell your mom to call me. No, no, no. That's not a phone call type of situation. That's a in person. We need to speak as adults and resolve this situation. And you know, and first I spoke to my fiance about it, and then I ended up talking to her father about it. But you know, like I said, family really pulls together and draws strength from each other when you get through and work through the problems and the issues together as a family, right? That's like the most important thing that I have found in my family. Next slide. So I put this because I like It's not her, don't worry. Ohana means family. Family means nobody gets left behind or forgotten. And maybe that's not always, but when we know better, we can do better, right? So like with me in the beginning of the slide, when I was saying about my oldest son and the growing pains that he went through, with me learning how to co-parent and realizing that it wasn't a competition with dad, that it was my son loves both of his parents, and there's enough love in the world to love more than just your mother and your father, right? So there's dad remarried, and he has a stepmom, and she has a whole line of family, so he's connected with her and that now, right? And but you don't know what you don't know, right? And so like now that I've had a few kids, 4 of them, one on the way. So there's a few. When you know better, you do better, right? So that's kind of how it is. It's not perfect, and it's not always, the greatest thing. Uh, kids go through a lot of stuff. I know for me growing up, I went through a lot of stuff, and I didn't have the ideal perfect family. So not everybody does, but when you know better, you can do better, right? Next slide. And just trying to use the WIN formula, right? WIN. When you state specific behavior that you don't like, right? So when co-parenting with the other parent, you just kind of like, listen, I didn't like this. I wasn't okay with this, and I'm sorry, I don't agree, right? But you do it in a fashion where it doesn't have to be conflict. It doesn't have to be, anger and hostility or anything like that. But you can state, how you feel. And then of course, express your feelings and your thoughts, like I said, right? So that's important. And then need and want, specifically, what is it that you want to change, right? So you think to yourself, okay, well, if I try to change the way that I view this a little bit more, maybe the outcome will be a little bit different next time around, right? With dad or with the stepmom or whomever, right? So just trying to stick with that WIN formula. I put the Simpsons because they're a crazy family, but hey, they're still a family, right? Next slide. So basically, what it comes down to is successful co-parenting is learning to love the other parent enough to keep the children first. Well, I'm thinking not so much love, but like enough, tolerate enough, put up with. But, it's about being real. These times are really tough, right? So um, co-parenting and COVID and, the different kids in the dynamic of the family dynamic, bringing in different elements of, stepdad, stepmom, their family, his family, things like that. So just trying to be real and these times are really tough. So just trying to like and tolerate and put up with, really. But that is the successful co-parenting with the other parent, to definitely put the child first. Really important to do that. So now I'm going to leave it open for any questions or discussion from anyone.
So while people are gathering their questions, we I think I have one. If you could talk a little bit, because we know we have a mixed audience. We have providers, it's parents. A lot of people here work with families. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of having parenting classes when you're working with people in recovery? And so in my previous job, not with Be Strong Families, I did a co-parenting class with the drug court, and they waited till a certain amount of time that they had been within the recovery process to introduce the parenting classes. But I've noticed that some places they don't really do that, and then some places do. I think it's a best practice. So if you can share your little, experience about why it's important to introduce parenting and co-parenting for people who are in recovery.
It's important because for me, being in recovery, there's a lot of things that I have to do on a daily basis to stay substance free, right? And it's a struggle, and life is a struggle. And when you're not with the other parent, and there may be, like I said, some hostile feelings towards one another, that can get in the way of a lot of things. So it's like really important to recognize that there are different dynamics of family, right? So it's like I was saying, it's not just mom and dad. So it's mom and dad aren't together anymore. So mom's with someone else and dad's with somebody else, right? So giving them those tools to co-parent is really important while you're in recovery, because you're already facing trying to stay substance free, right? And to work your program and to stay connected. So if you don't have those tools that you need for co-parenting, it makes it really difficult, right? And people struggle with that. And sometimes it can make reoccurrences happen, like because of the stress and the added extra stuff, you know. That's why I think it's important for me.
Yeah. I also think, and anyone can feel free to raise your hand and we'll unmute you if you want to speak with Yolanda and I. We have good 20 minutes and we can have some fruitful discussion about co-parenting. Um, I think the other thing is, at Be Strong Families, we always talk about that, parenting is part natural and part learned. So I think any parent has to have that. The piece that stood out for me was when you talked about the classes, right? Like learning different skills, making sure you understand how to communicate. And so Melissa says, Yolanda, you speak from the heart. Thank you so much. And thank you. And that's from Melissa. Thank you, Melissa. And I think that's really important point that you bring up, because even when you have learned, right, you still have those moments where you're like, oh, I shouldn't have said that like that, or oh, let me try to practice this skill set. Because especially now during COVID, I think everybody's highly stressed. Everybody's under a lot of pressure. There's so many things that we're juggling, from being online and with our kids, and so co-parenting becomes something that really you have to work at. And
Yeah.
so our audience hasn't put any questions. So I want to pose a question to people who are joining us. What are some of the things that you think COVID has brought up in relationship to just parenting, but specifically co-parenting? Because even if you're in a relationship, right, it doesn't have to be that you're divorced. It doesn't have to be that you're separated. Just even in a two-parent home, there are issues during this time that come up as far as co-parenting and making decisions. So Wendy said communication needs to be clear, definitely. And communicating through the frustration, right? That tends to be very difficult in any type of relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is something you need to practice too. I mean, it really is. Like for me, like I said in the beginning, it was so different than what it is now, right? So like I was so angry, but I was also struggling myself as well in my recovery and with my network, right? So definitely. Um,
So Danielle said, beautiful job, Yolanda. Self-care is huge right now for me. Otherwise, I would get snippy and impatient. I totally agree, Danielle. It is, we were talking before we broadcast just how we're just ready for it to be over. Like the situation, like I have like COVID fatigue at this point. Tamara says it's been a struggle for my daughter. Her children's father often travels for work and doesn't seem to understand that he needs to self-isolate for 2 weeks when he returns. This means he doesn't see the kids for those 2 weeks. Yeah,
and
that's
that's
definitely.
hard. Yeah, and that's hard because especially if the other parent doesn't want that all that time to go by without seeing, their child. But you have to, we're in the age of COVID, right? So like it's unfortunate, but
And so I'm sure, Tamara, the communication piece is really important there, having to explain to your daughter why she's not seeing her dad, and kind of
Right.
what Yolanda was talking about. Norma says, don't speak badly about each other to the kids. Definitely.
Definitely not, because here's the thing. I can think whatever I want to think about the other parent. For me, it's their father. I can think whatever I want about their father, but at the end of the day, they're not going to be happy with that because they love their father. They don't want to hear me talking bad about their father, right? And vice versa.
Yeah, Siobhan said, or in front of them.
Right.
Tamara says, it's caused some tension between them. My grandkids are happy when they get to see their dad on the video chat, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think definitely we talked about this as being creative. Wendy said, video chat is a great way to stay in touch. Monica says, I agree with Norma. Also, don't let the kids hear you talking to others about their parents. That's important.
Yep.
And I'm divorced, and so what I have found that the kids will end up making, particularly in a situation where the parents may not, one parent isn't doing what they need to do, or just as parenting based on the information that they have. Right, we parent the way we were parented, unless we decide and learn different skill sets. But what happens is the kids start to see for themselves. You really don't even have to say anything, and they'll end up bringing to you like, well, mom, it's different like this when I'm with dad's house, and it's different like this. So you really don't even have to say anything, but you do have to help them, process when it's that type of situation where they're seeing dramatic differences in how they care for one place versus the other place.
Right. Like I had said, they'll recognize the difference. There's nothing that you need to say or do.
Yvonne said co-parent is very tricky because they're still going to love the other parents. So keep it positive and allow the kids to make their own decisions, and it will show up. Definitely, Yvonne. Definitely. It is very, very tricky.
Yeah, it is. It doesn't come easy, and it doesn't come just, you have to work at it. You really do. You have to work at it. But the joy in your children that you see when you, um, when you nourish the relationship with the other parent is just so much greater than trying to get back and trying to be angry and try to compete, right? It really does ultimately affect the child overall. It really does.
What parenting curriculum do you all have your own parenting curriculum, or do you use a standard one that could possibly be a resource for some of our webinar family with us today that you all use at Greater Tilton?
We do we did parenting of teens, like I had said, right? And we do parenting journey and recovery, just helping parents along the way with their journey and recovery, and like I said, there's a lot of tools that parents might have had and have forgotten or never even had, right? So what we do is we come together. Well, what we did before COVID was we came together as like a family type environment. So we had childcare provided for them. They came in, we fed them something to eat, and we all sat at the table together and had something to eat, and engaged and spoke with one another, and then there's, of course, there's parenting journey 2, which is the next step after parenting journey and recovery. There's a lot of different things as play group that we have here as well. A lot of that looks a little bit different because of COVID, but
Gotcha. So, but is that curriculum, did Greater Tilton create that, or is that like a curriculum that
right.
they can find, or is it something that you all created yourselves as a part of your process, your program?
Parenting journey and recovery is kind of something that we didn't create per se ourselves, but we work with people who have created, like Donna Marston and Polly Morris and
Okay, because I was
Ellie.
just
Yeah.
wondering if maybe that's something that some of the people who work with families might be interested in. Tamara said, years ago I went through a similar situation um with my ex-husband. I found it was best to take the high road and keep the peace whenever possible. I never spoke badly about their dad because the kids know they are a part of him. I didn't want them to think that there was badness in them. Just because he didn't do the things the way I would, didn't mean that he didn't love them He was doing the best the way he knew how. And yes, Yvonne, they all grown. They both have learned for themselves the kind of person their father is. I was glad I allowed them to get there on their own. Monica says she agrees because you don't want them to be resentful.
Yeah, and I mean that does happen. Like with my kid's father, my son was like, I don't know what to believe, mommy. I don't know what to believe. He says all these things about you and they're not nice. And I said, well, you got to follow your heart and believe what you feel and hear, and just keep seeing, what mommy does, what daddy does, and base it upon that. How you feel in your heart. What do
Mhm.
what do you think? Kind of thing. Whereas he was confused and angry because he was like, well, dad said this and this and this, and I don't know what to believe. And it's like, what do you believe in your heart? So it's kind of like turning the question back on them in a very childlike way. You don't do it in an adult way, obviously.
Yeah, and kids are really smart and really resilient, and they pay attention to a lot more sometimes than we think that they do. And kind of, give give us the feedback that sometimes we aren't expecting, and you're like, oh my
Mm.
gosh, you're paying attention, but these are so resilient. And if you just speak to them, kind of like what you're talking about, it's much better outcome. Tamara says yes, and continue to set the best example that you can. And then I think also, just be real. Like we make mistakes as parents. We can't be above apologizing for the mistakes that we've made, for whatever reason, right? Just even being snippy sometimes just because you're frustrated or just because of this whole situation with COVID. Everybody's like a little bit on edge. And I think um, part of that co-parenting piece is, apologizing to the children. Um,
Owning
Sometimes
it.
it's difficult though when you don't when the other parent doesn't want to co-parent. Have you seen that? Not necessarily in your situation, but just like what maybe in the parents that you work with, like what happens when you have parents that really is trying to co-parent and then the other person just
Is
doesn't
there.
want to and just won't try, and I know that's a loaded question, Yolanda, but Tamika said it's so hard. If you have any thoughts about that or anything that you've seen when you're working with some parents and they say, hey, I'm trying, but he doesn't want to help or she doesn't want to help.
I mean, like you said, Alexandra, like the kids are not, they're very smart. So like if they see one trying, they're going to go to the other who's not, right? So they're going to, oh, well, mom's not letting me, but let me go to dad because I don't think he really cares, or vice versa, right?
Mm.
Parents children are very smart and they can see that, right? So it's difficult when you have one parent that's, trying and the other parent's just like, whatever, which I have seen.
Mm. Tamara said, in watching my daughter deal with her situation, I'm so glad I handled things the way I did. I'm proud of the woman, mother she has become, and I'm at peace with the way she has handled things. Monica says, as they say, it always takes a village. My children's grandparents, uncles, and aunts were very helpful, especially when my daughter went away to college. And that's kind of where I am now. Like with my twins, it's my mother, my father, it was my brother who passed away. I have another brother, and just some even my friends that I consider brothers. They kind of like stepped in um, to help and to make sure that there's that balance when um, do you have a parent that's not around or not trying to co-parent or keeps making the issue a relational issue between you and the other person. And so now it's been at the point where it's like you don't even have to talk to me. They're 13, they're not 2. You can talk directly to them, but it always kind of comes back to me because that's the way to hide and not deal with the questions that at 14, being smart again, that they're going to say, hey, why aren't you doing this? You haven't done this and you haven't done that. And so I think what I've tried to do is build just a support system, like Monica said, is around them so they see, other examples. So I think that's
Absolutely.
extremely important.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we are at about 7 minutes, and Yolanda, I'm gonna let you respond, but I wanted to let everyone know that if you have any other quick questions, Please put them in the chat or raise your hands, and then we'll kind of start to begin our wrap up. Yolanda, I think I kind of cut you off. So is there something you were going to
No,
add?
you didn't cut. No, you didn't cut.
Oh,
me
okay.
off.
I just wanted to make sure.
No, not at all. Yeah, no, I was just, it's just interesting because family, like I said, is so much more than just, mom and dad. And, that's kind of why I put the picture, the photo of the family tree. Because like Monica said in the chat that she had her grandparents to help. So it's really important.
What do you have any final thoughts for us, Yolanda?
Just do the best that you can. That's all I can say. Do the best that you can, and always think of the children and that they're the most important, that they come first. And like I said earlier, like, you don't have to say anything, you don't have to do anything. Your children are smart and they will see, and they'll come up with their own opinions and their own decisions. But at the end of the day, they still love the other parent. So
Definitely.
yeah.
Next slide, Dee.
So this is my thanking everyone for joining the webinar, and this is my contact information and what I do. So yeah.
Okay, next slide, Dee. As always, we want to remind you of what's coming up. On tomorrow is the power of participatory art projects to strengthen families and communities. And then on Friday, when the world is on fire and you're beyond maxed by COVID, what then? And that's going to be very fun. That's going to be presented by Kathy Wolf, who is our CEO, and Robin Harvey, who's our National Director of Training Services. Also, if you're interested in our Spanish language webinar series, go visit our website at COVID-19 support. Next slide, please. And as always, we want to do our close out. We want you to share on social media about co-parenting and strengthening families. And if you can put in the chat right now, and also when you share on our social media, #amplify @BeStrongFamilies. We have some hashtag, or first, we have thanks for the discussion from Tamara. Yvonne said amplify parenting because it's hard. Also, Dee has launched a poll, so please participate. Monica said to tell you thank you, Yolanda. Elda said amplify love, co-parenting. Tamara said amplify keep peace and kids first.
Yeah.
Also, Monica said amplify resilience. Yes. That is one thing I've definitely learned through my parenting and journey of divorce. You will definitely learn to be more resilient. Norma said, amplify, be in agreement with each other. Definitely perfect. I'm going to say hashtag amplify. Co-parenting is partly learned. That's one thing I think I took away from your presentation, Yolanda, is that you have to learn, #learn some parenting skills. Michael said, #amplify, we're all in this together. Yvonne said to tell us to have a great day and evening. Thank you, Yvonne, we appreciate you. And please keep your hashtags coming. Shannon said amplify co-parent. Yvonne said amplify togetherness. Also, Dee put in contact information for Yolanda if you want to reach out to her, learn more about their program. One thing that's really exciting is that Be Strong Families and Greater Tilton has partnered together. We are going to have our recovery cafe deck. Actually, I think it's in its final stages. It's already been printed, so that'll be something that we're offering, and it's a training that'll be available soon, and we'll co-present together. Siobhan said, amplify us. Tamara says, by the way, love the whole Tilton area. So be on the lookout for our recovery cafe, which is based on, it's a little different. And Dee put in the link for the Recovering Together Cafe in the Box. And it's based on the vitality domains, not on the protective factors. So it's a little bit different, but it's really been awesome to watch the process between three. There's one other organization that's also involved. Next slide, please, Dee. Melissa said, love you back. Woohoo, Yolanda. Yolanda, I'm sorry, we have a partner named Yolanda.
It's okay.
Also, if you are interested or you know someone that would be excellent to present for the webinars and would love to host with us, please email our CEO, Kathy at bestrongfamilies.net. And we would love to hear from you and or someone you know. Wendy said, great job, Yolanda. We enjoyed you. And we have about a few more people that need to vote. So thank you, Monica. We appreciate you. We always appreciate all of you joining us every day. Kathy will be back tomorrow. She may be, well, yeah, she should be back tomorrow. If not, you'll see me again. So I hope I've been a great stand-in the last 2 days for Kathy. And we look like we are almost finished with the voting. We have a few more people. And thank you again. Thank you so much, Yolanda. We appreciate you. Thank you for everybody for joining. And we will see you again back tomorrow. Have a beautiful day and a great evening.
Thank you, Alexandra and Dee and everybody for attending. I appreciate you.
Yes, and thank you, Dee. We appreciate you.
Thank you, everyone. I'll stay here just for one more moment in case anybody are wrapping up their polls.
Okay, everyone is finished. Have a great, peaceful, and productive day, and we'll see you tomorrow.